We decided, basically, what I've done is try to copy out what we tried to write down during part of the meeting. When asked what would we like to talk about, I thought about it and thought, well, we've done quite a lot of themes to death previously. I go to meetings on learning how to manage the failing training. I go to meetings on how to deliver bad news. I go to meetings on how to deliver the famous what's its name sandwiches. And I go to meetings on how to do remediation. And at the end of the day, what that's doing is just pulling up the bottom end. It doesn't actually look at what to do with the top end. And at the end of the day, if you're not careful, you spend most of your time trying to pull up the bottom end without really thinking about the top end of the customers. And 80% of your work goes into 20% of your junior doctors. Fortunately, I have an Amanda who can do quite a lot of it for me. Because as a DCT, you're also often a clinician, you've got other roles within the hospital, and the MEOs are vital for this. So they also have different strengths, and different DCTs have different strengths themselves. So I thought, what about a new topic? Let's try creating excellence in the learning environment. Well, first of all, I think everybody would agree that excellence is not the same as failure, but you can learn from your mistakes. And we asked everybody what they thought you could do to promote excellence. Well, there is a role for awards for junior doctors and supervisors, but that's not a be-all and end-all. Really, to get to the point of excellence, you have to have a culture of excellence, which is the role of also the registrars, not just the others, not the senior doctors alone, but it's everybody in the organisation. And training for supervision is useful for everybody in the organisation. Well, what is excellence? Well, actually, what's excellent in Alice Springs may be completely different from Tennant Creek, which may be different completely from Royal Darwin. So it's very site-specific. So we all realise that. One of the things that makes for excellence is knowing what the career requirements are for people in future, knowing what they want to do, and that is career guidance as well. We also acknowledge that there is a problem with fragility in excellence. You might have the best team in the world, and then suddenly somebody gets pregnant and takes maternity leave, somebody gets hit by a small Mack truck, and 3 people go and resign. At which point you change all your staff and you're starting again. So you might have had excellence, but it's very, very transient. And again, part of it may be obtained by individualising training plans for people, and that goes along with career counselling. So, we have to support the supervisors to build our excellence. We had a brainstorm and came up with what supports supervisors to build excellence. Well, firstly, if you have the choice, selection of your supervisors helps. There are some people that yes, we take them, but you know that they're not going to be particularly good, but there are others who you can sort of encourage and get them to do even more of it. It needs to be specialty appropriate. It needs to be service-wide. You need to involve all the departments within the organisation if possible. It can't just be that you've got the most fantastic department of medicine where Mary wins an award without trying to take the other departments along as well. There's also got to be realised that there's a role for generational change. I've been doing medicine rather longer than a lot of people here, and certainly I'm a bit towards the latter part of my career, and I see things slightly differently from the juniors. So I have supervisors at different stages in the career. Mary, who won the award, is a very newly minted consultant. I'm sort of getting to the other end, and I'm nearly a geriatric consultant. You've got to have time, which has got to be sanctioned. Now, to get sanctioned, ideally, it should be built into the EBA for your supervisors. In an ideal world, you need to give feedback to supervisors, and one of the talks yesterday was about how to sort of mentor supervisors by sitting in on them. I have to say that within department, we often do departmental presentations where we can all discuss how well we're supervising and doing things like that. But that's not possible for everybody. We also discussed whether there was a role for the universities, and at the end of the day, yes, there is. British University does a Masters of Medical Education, which quite a lot of my colleagues are slowly and steadily working their way through. What about the support for the trainee doctors? Well, there was a risk of buzzwords. We decided, not quite sure what, but that was something that came up, and you have to be assertive. There's an issue between social media and practice, which was a concern, and you have to invest time. At the end of the day, to get excellence, it requires time. And that time isn't just the MEO, the DCT. While they are very important, other people also need to be involved. Avoiding performance punishment. What's performance punishment? I've seen junior doctors who've been really, really, really good. So good that by the end of their second year, somebody has just made them into a medical registrar. And by halfway through their third year, they're a quivering little wreck on the floor. They have been over-promoted because they've been so good. I've seen this with quite a few doctors over the years. I've even come across one who was actually thinking of chucking medicine in completely. She ended up coming back to visit us in Alice Springs, so we said, why don't you have a job as a junior RMO in ED for 6 months while you get your head back into the right space. There's also different requirements when you're trying to promote excellence, when you've got the older entrants, people with previous career plans, people with previous careers behind them, people with a changing career. There are also problems with the mature age students in some cases because of their other commitments, and we acknowledge that. We did think, however, it was very important to promote physical well-being, and the other thing that is useful that was brought up was the My Career website. At the end of the day, the recommendation is that supervision has to be taken seriously within an organisation. It's very nice if one department takes it seriously. It's much better if 2 departments take it seriously. But I think every organisation at times will have reached the point that they actually have certain departments which are not taking it seriously at all. And to take it seriously, you need an adequate number of supervisors. They need to have time. They need to have training. And the training should be along the Goldilocks principle. Not too little, not too much. There is a role for mandatory training. Mandatory training is going to be coming in, whether we like it or not. Not obviously in our space, but APRA at the moment is looking at mandatory training for people who are looking after IMGs. I know this because I've just got to look at the presentation and the quizzes that they've put together and road tested. And at the end of the day, the suitability of training has to be designed by a clinician. So the best training is designed by people themselves. But who should we be building this supervision for? Well, we've got to have supervision. Who do we need it for? Well, there's the students. Let's try and keep, there's so many students at the moment, sometimes can't keep up with them. We've got interns. Sometimes it seems they're coming out in years. We've got RMOs and we've got registrars. We've also got the IMGs. Now, there are all sorts of IMGs, And actually, a third of the doctors in this country are IMGs. After all, I obviously didn't quite come from here originally. And IMGs do have different training needs and do have different supervision requirements. Even now, I find some parts of the Australian healthcare system a bit baffling. So IMGs don't just need, often, particularly if they come from a third world country, they may have ongoing needs for several years, not just one or two. And the IMGs that we're dealing with can be at intern RMO level, but there are IMGs coming in at registrar level. There's also that group of IMGs coming in at consultant level, and they have different needs as well. Now these could be people coming in as from the UK. They will need a certain level of acclimatisation. So we need to have time built into our contracts to actually be able to supervise. Well, what sort of time should it be? Some contracts have 1/10 out of a week built in, but in many places it's probably going to have to be a bit more than that, because that is included in as part of the clinical duties. Now, I thought everybody should try and avoid the STP. I'd love an STP, because sometimes I'm struggling to find 10 people that are willing to do it, because sometimes it feels a bit more like the same 2 people. But in bigger hospitals, it should be possible to actually have more than the famous 10 people that turn up and do everything. The famous STP. I think there is a role for outside agencies to get involved in setting standards. The colleges already do this for people who are doing training of registrars. I had to go away for a long weekend to do a training course that we could, as part of our training programme. So we have registrars, we have RMOs, we have people doing diplomas. We all had to go and do a weekend. That's the stick. You could argue it's a carrot. The stick is if you don't do it, you don't get registrars. The carrot is that you then get very nice quality of junior doctors. The AMC are starting to, so APRA is starting to do this with the requirements to have IMGs, which will be coming in next year. And I think there's a good role here potentially for AMC to set some standards. I wonder if they could even sort of point towards where we can get suitable training. So, having looked at what we wanted to do to raise standards, we then morphed into what are the current issues. Well, supervision is a moving target, as everybody knows. Just when you think you've managed to catch up with the latest set of regulations, somebody goes and changes the ground rules. Just when you think you've caught up with what's the latest set of paperwork, somebody produces another set of paperwork. Just when you think you've worked out what the latest accreditation standards are, somebody rewrites them. So it is a moving target. It's also a moving target with what you want to do. Are we going to be supervising them for 12 months? Are we going to be supervising them for 24 months? Are we moving into that space where everybody who's not on a training scheme is within the remit of the DCT? Which then leads on to the problem of inadequate resources. It's very nice when you've got plenty of DCTs, but I don't know any organisation that's ever had enough resources. And resources doesn't mean people alone, it also means time. And most DCTs still maintain a fairly busy clinical role somewhere. If you haven't got a clinical role in some form, be it an administrative role, or be it a clinical hands-on role, it's very hard to sort of keep up with what's going on the shop floor. And at the end of the day, the big problem was whose job is it to oversee or supervise the senior RMOs, those non-accredited groups, the IMGs and the ex-IMGs. Now, in New Zealand, when I was there in '96, they introduced a medical act which basically said if you weren't, with effect from 2001, if you weren't if you weren't a specialist, you were a junior doctor. And they introduced the requirement that every 3 months you had to meet with your supervisor. You had to then fill in a form which was then sent into the medical council. That is one way forward. The UK has a slightly different model, but I think it's only a matter of time till this country gets to the point where we're doing this, and also revalidation. Personally, I think it would be very nice if I could keep that staved off for a bit, to the point that I can actually sneak out the other end, because it looks like even more paperwork than we're already having to do. But I think within a matter of 3 to 5 years, this will be on the cards, because I know that APRA are already looking at the different revalidation models. Now, when you have a revalidation model, you then have somebody to actually oversee and supervise these people that are caught in the gap in the middle. At the moment, they don't need to have end-of-term reports unless you sort of insist, and it becomes a little difficult. So what is the role of the MEU? Are we the experts in remediation within an organisation? Is that one of our future roles? Sorting out the customers at the bottom end, the poor doctors? Or is it partly looking at the top end as well? Are we the experts in this within our organisation? The other thing that came up, which was quite interesting, was the problem of rotational registrars to small hospitals. Often rotational registrars have been sent there with one arm twisted so far around their back that it hurts, often under duress. And they can be quite destructive at times. They're often not there because they want to be. I remember one who was sent to somewhere I was working for 12 months, and for the first 6 months there wasn't anything in the organisation that was exactly like it was before. And everything we did was, of course, wrong. Until he suddenly realised he was actually enjoying himself and doing the sort of work that he would never have done where he came from. And he then stopped being quite so destructive. But we do get this in some organisations, that you can have rotational registrars. Is there a role for the DCT or the other heads of department writing reports on such people, particularly when they're quite destructive and being difficult? I don't know what the answer to this is, because very often if you actually go back to the relevant head of department and say, do you realise Dr. So-and-so is a bit of a difficult customer? They ignore it and pass it on to, send them back to their rotating hospital, and it just gets swept under the carpet. Should there be a role for the DCTs, MEU, to write reports on such people? This was mentioned. What we put together was a couple of resolutions at the time, and these were actually penned briefly at the end of the meeting. The DCT group strongly support the case for ongoing funding of CP Med. And the DCT group strongly support the case for a formal 2-year programme which would negate the effects of the variability of supervision to some extent. So, those were the 2 resolutions that we put. Many of the other things that you could have put into resolutions, like mandating a certain amount of time to be given for training purposes, actually falls within the AMA, and very often is best negotiated, not by means of people encouraging them, but by actually the means of the trade union trying to get it mandated. However, the resolution has moved on slightly, so this was put together by Barbara. So basically, the Medical Education and Training Forum resolution, this is the most important resolution we can do, and if Barbara would like to talk to it.
Thanks, Paul. I've got enough time to introduce myself, so I've got a quick voice. I work at Royal Darwin Hospital and I've worked remote top end, and we were the first group of Australian trained interns ever that Royal Darwin had in the end of 1977. So the 5 of us came and 4 of us were still here until 2 years ago, so that's probably the best retention rate around the country, I suspect. And at that time, when we first came, the hospital had 310 beds, and Fanny Bay Jail had 120, and the hospital now has 365, and the new jail just finished has 850, so that's a bit of a comment of where the Northern Territory is at. Just to talk to this resolution that we... just talk about that resolution. We put that together at the DCT forum, and then speaking to MEOs and junior doctors later, they felt it was very important that we support it. I tried to put it up Tuesday, but it wasn't really the relevant time, but unfortunately it's a much smaller group here now. But I feel it's important that something comes from the conference in terms of supporting CPMEC. As smaller jurisdictions, I've certainly found over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been working with CPMEC. CPMEC has been an enormously supportive organisation for me as a DCT, working in isolation, certainly for junior doctors, forming the JMA forum, and certainly for MEOs, putting together a professional development day last year. In May last year, the Commonwealth decided to defund a number of things that affect regional and rural health and training. They got rid of PGPPP, which was really a vital program in terms of encouraging junior doctors into general practice and particularly regional rural practice. They got rid of Health Workforce Australia effectively, and what you may not know is that they actually stopped funding CPMEC, and due to Dr. Jagg's good budgetary management, it has managed to stay funded until now. I just think it's such an important organisation for all the PMCs that work with it, and the number of important developments that they've put through into the Australian Curriculum Framework for Junior Doctors, the fantastic program of professional development program for registrars. They've done professional development forum for consultants and a number of other things. So I think the organisation is just very vital. It's a very lean organisation. It's 2 or 3 people usually. So that's the background to this. You can probably read what we've put together there. Maybe it's a bit wordy. I'd be very happy if people suggest they want to change the words, but I thought it needs to be led by the first sentence that the forum urgently calls on federal government to commit to support pre-vocational medical training by providing funding to CPMEC, and I think we have to have a time frame minimum of 5 years. And you can probably just read the rest. We're concentrating on the impact that it will impact junior doctor training and supervision with risk to quality patient care and patient safety. And we've just mentioned some of the areas in which CPMEC has had very important roles, and the fact that rural and regional supervisors of junior doctors will be adversely affected, and also those in major centres. So we're happy to change it, but the way that I would suggest we could forward this is, number one, we'd ask the PMCs in each state to lobby right to their Public Health Minister and Chief Minister. So I'm Vice President of AMANT, and I also sit on a National AMA Council, and we've certainly been active, for example, in PGPPP and the STP program, which is probably going to finish at the end of next year. We have lobbied quite hard with the Federal Minister, and we have quite an active lobbying body to do that. So I would certainly put this up to Federal AMA and to our State AMA body, and we do meet with our Health Minister on a monthly basis, so that's the method that we could do here. But anyone who is involved in state AMAs, I think that's the other method that we could put this up. I'm hoping CPMEC may be able to put put that directly to the federal minister, but I think having lobbying state branches as well as federal would be a way forward with this. I think that's mainly what I wanted to say, but if anyone's got any comments and if you'd like to suggest rewording that in any way.
Thanks, Barb. Any comments or questions, ladies and gentlemen? When it first came up, we thought, well, that wasn't the time to develop the wording. Thank you for putting some time into this. I will mention that in the interim, there's a draft being prepared by Brendan Crotty from Victoria, which is a 2-page letter, which fills this out to some extent. It's something that you can select the appropriate bits, and we'll circulate that. Our suggestion is that each PMC write, as you say, to their minister. It clearly should go to the AMA as well. The important thing is that the meeting where this may come up is at the beginning of November, so time is of the essence.
With that in mind, Richard, could I suggest that we don't play with the wording, because you can spend years playing with wordings and actually change not one dot of the intent. So I think leaving the wording alone is probably the best option at this stage, because we don't have time.
Sorry, Gabrielle, my suggestion was I'm following what we usually do at AMA National Conference.
Yeah,
and we change the wording now, we agree, we vote on it, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm suggesting.
And the other thing is maybe sending some of this information to the rural groups, so like the local, because most of the places that are going to be the worst affected are going to be the smaller places, which are actually firmly within the realm of the rural health sector. And there's a lot of rural health groups that are involved, and they have very good access to ministers.
Fantastic. Thank you for the suggestion. Yes?
Just with that last sentence, and I know you, Gabrielle, saying don't do the wording. It kind of seems a bit weird that it's rural and regional and then also in major centres as well. Perhaps one of the things I think government people listen to is money. So, actually the small outlay on keeping CPMEC going has the potential to save the government millions in workforce kind of distribution factors, rural and regional health provision, all that sort of thing. And so actually highlighting that, I think, might be useful to say that, this is a small outlay, and yet it would save the government millions into the future, and making sure doctors are actually in the areas of need and in rural and remote regions as well as major centres.
Thank you. Barb, how do you want to do this? Do you want to take points on board and redraft it and then circulate it?
We can. I think with my experience with putting a lot of motions up through to politicians, they have to be succinct, and that needs to be in one very short sentence.
Yeah.
I guess what you're saying is potentially this can, but you have to actually be able to quantify, and I don't know how you quantify it.
Yes, Jack.
I think Richard referred to a CPMEC.
Can't hear you, Jack.
Can you stand up, Jack?
Richard referred to a template that's being developed by CPMEC, being led by Brendan Crotty, which has got many of those issues. So in addition to the resolution, the letter actually spells out very much the kind of things you were talking about. So the resolution and the letter, they go hand in hand. So I think I'm more inclined to have the resolution as pithy and have the supporting text.
So in other words, a pithy resolution and a longer letter which you can adapt for your local minister circumstances and so on. But it does in fact cover that. It's not long, well, it's 2 pages, but it's quite well expressed. And people can adapt as they wish.
So maybe it might be better, originally we just had rural regional, but I think it's important to say that this does affect people in major centres. So maybe if we just rephrase that to rural regional and major centres will be affected by the loss of CPMEC, that sort of short sentence, and then if there is a letter that sits behind this that can have more detail. But I have the feeling this is even too long from what we've sent to politicians in the past. But I'm very happy to progress this through federal AMA and our state AMA branch and through our PMC here. I guess what we would normally do at AMA, we would actually someone would second the motion. I don't know how we do it here, and we would actually vote if people agree that this resolution comes from National Conference. Is that what you would suggest, Richard?
Is that a comment or a second?
Just a question about the minimum 5 years. Just worried that it can be then negotiated that that's the term. Is it perhaps that you're after recurrent funding?
I put that in because there was nothing there, and I thought I need to have some minimum.
Yeah.
So, yep, we could change that to recurrent funding. Usually government funds in cycles, periods of years. So we could put minimum 5 years with current funding. Would that be?
Comments?
Can I suggest we make it recurrent funding and let the politicians sort out how long the funding will be? But it needs to be recurrent.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
do we agree recurrent then? Does that address your point? Thanks, Greg. Okay. So with the amendments that Barbara's in her head, is there a seconder for what she's proposing?
I think that would, if this is the way the forum runs, I think it should probably have a seconder, and
Yes.
we put it to the conference if everyone agrees or if anyone disagrees.
I'm happy to second it.
Thanks,
Thank
Catherine.
you. Anyone want to speak against? It's an interesting forum to do that. Comments? So, the motion is put, ladies and gentlemen. All those in favour? A few people aren't voting. A few are against. Okay, who didn't vote? There are a few. Jag didn't vote, yes, and I didn't vote either. So, I record that as carried unanimously.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll be very soon.